Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Strange Encounters Down Under. And for this episode, we've got a guest. We've got Greg Doyle here with us. And Greg has had a very unusual experience. And Greg, I don't know whether you call it astral travel or out-of-body experiences, or what would you call it?
That's a very good question, Cheryl. Great to be on the show, by the way. I would call it a bit of both. I think a lot of people have asked me what I think it is. I think for me, the out-of-body experience is when you kind of go out in real time, what I call real-time astral, like when you're like a kind of basically like a ghost and you see your body. Whereas the astral experience, to my mind, is when you go into other dimensions kind of stuff. So the out-of-body experience is kind of like in this dimension, but you're out. So what I call kind of the fourth dimension, the closest dimension.
Right.
So that's the kind of what I think is the difference, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you just kick us off? I know you've written a book, and we'll talk about that at the end. And you've got your experiences in there, but why don't you kick us off with how it all started? And I'm particularly interested, and probably Ben too, that you actually saw a being that you thought was an extraterrestrial, or possibly. And just tell us about your experience.
Well, it did start out with a bang. I remember I was asleep one night. This was 23 years ago now, in March. And I was just asleep, and then basically woken up by a light coming to my forehead. And really, I became incredibly lucid. So I was absolutely aware that my body was asleep, but my mind was utterly awake. Not like a kind of a dream mind, but absolutely aware that my mind was awake. And it was coming with this light that was coming to my forehead, was also getting more and more, it was getting stronger and stronger. And there was also a wind to it, like a wind in my ears, which was really weird. And it was also, and I remember it also flooded into my heart, so I felt really good. That was one thing that I kind of equate with the astral experience, is often this feeling of kind of like, it's almost like an ecstatic feeling. It's just this incredible feeling of well-being. I felt so good. So I wasn't afraid because of this feeling in my heart. And it was like the light was kind of, I felt inviting me to go with it. So, and I did. I sort of made this conscious decision to go. I remember that. And then I found myself going down what I would later describe as a wormhole, because this was the first time I'd had such an experience. Kind of a twisting kind of tunnel. And then I came out I was hovering above, like it was the landscape incredibly vividly clear, like much clearer in this reality. I was hovering above and I was watching these, it was kind of an arid landscape. And there were these very tall buildings that were like on towers, disc-shaped at the top, but actual congruent towers with light, lots of windows. These were big towers. You could see lights on in some not. So I was very much aware that I was on a place that was not Earth, basically. And it was the feeling to me that it was like this contact with some other beings. And it was just, I remember coming back after that experience thinking, it was very random, incredibly real, very loving, very unearthly. And, I couldn't go back after that. That was the beginning of something absolutely extreme. And it was just the first of many experiences like that.
Was it like standing in a three-dimensional world? Like when you're in a dream, it still tends to be just a field of vision. Could you like turn around and see it in like that sort of depth of reality?
Yeah, I would actually call it like a higher dimensional world in 3D. In that everything, that was what really got me to. I think that's why these experiences I could often stay in for a while, because I was just so amazed with the reality and the high depth of the whole thing. Like I could sort of see around things, and it was like, it was so much more vivid in the 3D reality. That was the sticking point. Incredible.
Yeah. With Ben and my background in UFOs, I've got to drill you down about that being in a silver suit. Where do we start with that, Ben? I mean,
true.
If this is a sort of a I've often wondered about this when people have these experiences in altered states of consciousness, out of body, near death, etc. You know, are they really seeing what one might call extraterrestrials? If they are, okay, I get it. But if they're not, if they're sort of spirit beings of some description, why are they wearing silver suits?
It's very common, isn't it?
Yeah.
Suits.
Okay,
Yeah.
it is, is it? Yeah, right.
In the UFO field, in the contactee
Very
literature, they're reported as wearing silver suits, and that's supposedly a real extraterrestrial. So I'm wondering whether you've actually seen a real extraterrestrial, or one is peeking into your out of body experience, or they're where humans and extraterrestrials intersect.
Yeah.
Or there's a space or place or a how they can intersect with our consciousness.
Yeah, I reckon it's that, because I think, I've often wondered how they have the ability, because I used to try and go in the beginning, because I was kind of playing silly bugs with the Astral experience. So often I'd go out of body and I'd watch what people are doing, and I would try yanking them out of body, and often against their will early on. And I remember telling me, don't do that again. In the nicest sense. It sounds a little bit like being like a teacher kind of thing. But I remember thinking, okay, so there's something going on. But I've often wondered, for this particular being in the silver suit, obviously he was able to take me out of the dream state into a very lucid state, which preceded what I would call a full-blown astral experience. So therefore, and from other experiences which I'll relate, I feel that they know our workings very well. I feel that, in terms of timelines, they either have a hand in our development, as in the making of us, and our systems, or they're aspects of us in the future. I think that particular one was interesting because I remember hugging him/her as though he or she was a good friend. I remember that. I remember feeling that, a good friend, and I remember feeling that particular being kind of backing away, not really that comfortable with the emotional human experience, but a very loving energy nevertheless. And I remember often I had these experiences where I'd go up to these elevators at the end of my bed. Often they come in spates of experiences. And this is when I was living in Melbourne after living in Austria, where it all started. And then there's this elevator would pop at the end of the bed, and I realized that was Astral, because I knew there was an elevator in my room. That's how I knew. So that's what I call kind of real-time Astral, or the out of body. But I remember getting the elevator, and I go up and I get off at this floor, and I'd meet with these beings around a table who looked a bit like us. Okay. But I remember thinking at the beginning they're kind of cold-hearted, but I remember after a while they had no barriers. So it was like they had no emotional bodies. And what I'm seeing, because all this thing has got me, all these experiences got me into energy healing, where often I will come upon a client and I will sense straight away that this person is an alien. Like I will see their body there. And what is interesting is when I communicate with that extraterrestrial, often, like I remember one particularly vivid experience, and that particular extraterrestrial wanted to experience what it was like to be emotional. Now the human who'd come along had real issues expressing emotions. So that's interesting that those two were kind of having this, But in this experience where I meet around this table, what I found is it was always telepathic. They were not human. They looked a bit like us. I thought maybe they're high dimensional aspects of us, but they seemed to have no emotional bodies, and it seemed to, and then I started to wonder about the human experience. We tend to have this very dense emotional body that's often triggered, But yeah, so that was the main parallel I see from the other ETs I've seen too, is that they tend to be more not cold-hearted. They just tend to operate. It's always telepathic the way they speak. They always speak by name, and they tend to be, the ones I meet anyway, tend to be less emotionally demonstrative than we are, which is interesting.
But they look more human than like a classic alien pop
the
culture style image.
the one that in a past life regression, that energy, which I've seen a couple of times, is kind of a longish, bluishy, greenish kind of thing. A different kind of, not the classic kind of grey kind of thing. And so there's sometimes, but generally humanish. The other ones probably spoken to Cheryl about before, but there was a really interesting one early on too, where I'd hear these frequencies. So it was like a jet screeching, and I knew often these different frequencies would come and wake me up. So it's like I'll be asleep, generally on my back, because before dawn I know that was when it was going to happen. So I kind of prepare for takeoff. And I kind of, after a while, I kind of call it in. I kind of would imagine I'm listening kind of above my head or around myself as I fall asleep. So this kind of screeching jets would come in, and I'd go with it. And I remember the first time going out, really looking around, and all these astral bodies were going up, flying up away from the earth onto these massive ships. So whenever I've peeked out in what I call real-time astral above the earth, there are ships galore. Ships galore. The sky's full of ships. Anyway, so I remember going to these massive ships, it was plate, metal, kind of that dullish grey metal, very modern. I remember walking around the ship, and the other humans that were there, everyone's kind of walking around naked. They were kind of like they were in a daze, half asleep, zombie-like. And I would be just above water. I felt like my conscious, I had to really stay with it to stay above, to stay conscious. I would be trying to talk people into, you know what's going on here. This is. Come on, mate. Come on, wake up, kind of stuff. I remember once going out this little portal, like a little door, but I was on the ship, but I thought, this is interesting. There's grass there, but it wasn't earth. And then there's these beings were very tall, probably 7.5 feet. They had white skin, kind of these weird eyes. I just remember really white. They were totally white. And always telepathic. I remember when I went out this little door, one of them spoke to me for the first time, and he said, I never forget it. He said, you can leave whenever you want. You can even kill yourself, but we will always have access to your energy, and that is all we need.
That's an interesting statement.
It was interesting. And I remember what happened was there. I remember when I exited this, when I didn't go back, the last time I was there, we were around a massive, they'd feed us. So I just remember, the cutlery. I remember examining the cutlery, which was very good. But we're on these huge tables, all of these humans around, a few of these whites standing around. They'd feed us food, and it was quite weird. And I remember hearing a cow being slaughtered in the next room. And I stood up and I smacked the table with my fists, and I was moved to say, where next? Right? And then I remember them looking at me, and I wasn't invited back. That was the last time. That was the last time I went. When I analyzed the experience, it was the feeling, in dualistic terms, we would say, okay, are they negative beings or benevolent? I had the feeling that they were taking their nourishment from kind of the unconscious traumatic human state. It was like they were kind of, I had the feeling that they were kind of recycling the unconscious state. So I had the feeling there was something to do with the karmic model. So a lot of this whole karmic model started coming, and I started getting kind of windows into the human experience and how certain beings gain nourishment or may perhaps manipulate certain things to gain. So they were just gaining nourishment from the human condition, from the unconscious human condition. That was the feeling.
Yeah.
Interesting. This is interesting. This one started through, and as I said, all these memories are just engraved. They're more than memories. This one started with a dream, and they're not often through dreams. Normally it's always through a vibrational start, but it did go into vibration. So I'm in a dream, I'm crossing a bridge in the dream, and there's a guy there, or a girl, short, bald, in a silver kind of bodysuit, spacesuit. androgynous being. And I go up to them, it's in a dream, and I seem to know them in the dream, and I go up and hug them, give them a really good hug. I know them really well. And he or she pushes me away, didn't really want the hug, not that much, and just said, Greg, let me show you something. And then the vibrations come and wake me. Normally that doesn't happen, but it can happen through dreams. And there are ways you can control it through dreams too, which I'll get into later. So, the next thing, I'm looking through my brain. That's how it feels. And there's lasers of light coming in, and it's like dentist drills. It's so loud. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't know if I can take this. It goes bzzz, and I've got these lights coming into my brain, lasers, and I'm thinking, well, this is actually really uncomfortable. I'm going to abort. I'm about to abort, then it stops. Then all of a sudden there's these really strange instruments or machines, very modern things being shown on like an invisible carousel, one after the other. And I think, oh, that's interesting, no idea what that is. Then the next thing's very interesting. There's a little screen being fitted, the upper right hand of my vision, there's 4 little corners of like a digital video screen. I see it going, and then there's all these like hieroglyphs, and then they're going really quickly, and it feels like little coins dropping into my brain. It's not an unpleasant experience. And that was the first real feeling of extraterrestrial intelligence messing around with me with the technological kind of thing. And it kind of harped back to my who am I with the alien and the first thing going to that. So I realized there's something going on that is outside of the human experience. That was, for me, very interesting to feel the technology. In the end of that one I just started to hear people talking downstairs. I thought, oh, that's going to wake me up. And then I was flying back to my body. But what I found is the whole time thing doesn't really matter, because often I'll hear my guides or people talking to me in the astral. And as I open my eyes, because I like to experiment and go into full wakefulness, the voice goes really quickly. So the whole time thing in the astral doesn't really count. It's not linear. Interesting. There'd be a certain vibration that would wake me up, and I'd recognize it. It was a vibration that also my sister has, which is interesting, my older sister. And it's kind of a metallic, it's a screeching like jets. See the ships before we enter, the massive ships. For want of a better picture, that picture is very close. All these naked astral bodies were being flown into these ships at night, huge ships. Inside it was kind of plate metal, pretty sharp, as in, very modern kind of stuff. Very, very real once again. The people who inhabited the ship were tall, white skin, white hair, weird eyes. They spoke telepathically. And I was on the ship, so I was sort of nudging people going, oh, this is pretty interesting. And everyone's walking around like a zombie. And it's interesting, there's a lot of stuff going on in the astral, as you can imagine. I'll get into this further. Some of it sounds a bit sinister, but if you get beyond that whole polarity thing, it just is what it is. These people, they were mainly guys, but very tall, over 7 foot, around 7 foot tall. Once I was kind of walking around, a lot of humans there, and I go out a little portal, little door, and I'm on a piece of ground, but it's not earth. I'm going, well, this is interesting. And then a guy is standing there, one of the tall whites, and he says to me, you can leave whenever you want. This is through his mind. You can leave whenever you want. You can even kill yourself. All we need is access to your energy, and we always have that. And at that moment I noticed I have a little bracelet around me. And it's interesting because I'm not into sci-fi. I don't watch that stuff. After a while, I kept going back there for quite a while, and I was trying to tell people, this is really weird. And I found to stay conscious there was very, very hard. I had to really try to stay above water. There was a real feeling to go unconscious. We had these massive tables we'd be eating food at. I remember once and the cutlery was perfect, and the food was actually very good. But anyway, huge tables, and I was hearing a cow being slaughtered in a room close by. And I stood up and I said, where next? And that was the last time I was invited back. I never went. And what I found is that the feelings were that there later on I see more evidence of this, not because I asked you, just because I saw it. But it was a feeling that this kind of sleepfulness that we have as humans, by our passivity on a certain level, we've allowed ourselves due to contracts, and I'll get into that later, to be usurped in some way. And this, it actually gets the relevance to the human energy body, which is actually very charged and is actually an appetite for certain beings.
And we'll start to talk about the interdimensional side, but it's so fascinating hearing everything that you've got to say. So this little video I'm about to share, we're only going to share part of the clip because it does go for 4 minutes. And I have managed to find a little treat for you guys to go with this too. So let me pop this up.
Blatantly talk about interdimensional aliens, and everyone's cool with that, dating back to July 8th, 1947, the exact same date as the first ever mainstream UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico. This is on their official government site. Like, this document actually exists. It's real. And it kind of already told us what all these drones, UAPs, and orbs in our skies really are almost 80 years ago. I'm warning you, this is about to get wild, because a lot of what's written here has been happening right in front of us. The document is several pages long, but this page right here is by far the most interesting. It's a memorandum addressed to scientists and military authorities, written by someone who has several degrees and is a former university department head. Definitely doesn't sound like your local nut job. It goes on to describe the flying saucers, as UFOs were commonly referred to back then, starting off by saying that any plane that attacks these saucers will almost certainly be destroyed, and warning that doing so may cause panic among the public, so keep it low-key. The document continues to explain these crafts in detail, and this is where it gets weird. According to this, some of the UFOs carry crews, like living beings flying them from the inside, and others are fully remote controlled. I feel like we kind of already knew that. Then it gives us a bit of hope, saying that whatever they are, their mission is peaceful and are just looking to settle on our planet. Not the worst news, right? These visitors are human-like, yet much larger than us, and are not from Earth, but from their own world, clearly. But they don't come from another planet, as we would expect, but rather an etheric realm, which interpenetrates our own and is not perceptible to us. Put simply,
So I just want to leave it there. I've just popped the link to that video for you guys in our little chat, and I had it up on screen, so you'll be able to go back and find that. But essentially, this is a CIA document. This was in July the 8th, 1947, I think the document was released, written, and it was actually from this guy. Let me just bring up another screen share. I found... so the man who wrote that paper and submitted it to the CIA, he also has written, or they've compiled his works and research into books. So you will be able to go over to, let me pop this in our little chat too. Oops. So highlight this so you guys can also grab this. Okay, so that's the link up on screen right now, but this is by Mead Lane, and it's the ether ship mystery and its solution. So it pretty much is talking about the things that we're seeing in the skies now, and it's got like a little preference as well at the start. So even just reading that, you'll get like a little bit more info. But yeah, they're referring to them as I guess UAPs, but ether ships, and they've got a mystery and a solution with the subtle flying discs. So yeah, you guys will find this really interesting. I only found this moments before Greg and I went backstage, so I'm like, oh, perfect timing, but I haven't had a chance to read it. So you guys will be able to go and read it as well. So with that last little bit where he talks about being almost like an ether dimension, he talked about it's interpenetrating with ours. What do you feel on that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, because a lot of people ask me that the aliens you meet in the Astral, are they real? Are they interdimensional? I feel kind of, what's the difference? They're a bit of both, aren't they? I mean, I have had beings follow me back into my bedroom after, because generally I have astral experiences when I'm sleeping before dawn.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've woken up and they've come into my bedroom and are talking to me, and so... And I'm awake, and I'm fully awake talking to them. So it is curious, isn't it? I feel that, I feel that perhaps like using craft when they get into our atmosphere, but they've gotten here through interdimensional means. And I mean, I know that these places I've been to have been through wormholes, and I didn't even, wouldn't have even called them wormholes until I discovered that word after seeing them in films and stuff. So, but that's where you get pulled through in the astral. I think that the fact that this is like an astral experience, an interdimensional experience, and also seen as scientific thing in terms of, they talk about wormholes and things like this kind of stuff. So it seems to be all one and the same, doesn't it? What I found, and you've probably seen yourself in the astral, like at night, like even during the day, like there are ships everywhere. They're everywhere. They're everywhere, and often I'll even have just lucid dreams where, and this is an interesting experience too, where it's not a full-blown astral experience, but just a very lucid dream. So something in the dream wakes me up to the fact that I'm dreaming, and often it is ships. So I'm often outside. I see these very clear ships, like very detailed ships above, and I'm all of a sudden aware that I am there looking at these ships. I'm aware that I'm in a dream. Now, is that an astral experience or not? I'd call that a lucid dream experience, but they're experiences that you're kind of woken up. They're kind of quasi-astral. It's all depending on your level of consciousness, how much consciousness you have there. But what I found is, it's funny, I had for a while, I had a recurring, I don't know if this is relevant, but I had a recurring lucid dream for a long time that there were these ships and I saw lots of humans running away. And then I found, and this was a recurring kind of dream that was interesting. There's a bit of a negative lace there with a lot of fear from the humans. So the last time I had this, I didn't go with everybody. I was just staying there, and they were sending down these pods from these ships. They sent down a pod that opened up. It's like a glass independent elevator almost. I got in the pod, and there were these two kind of greys, if you like. And I just said, "Where are we going?" And they said, "Home."